On the east coast of Patagonia in Argentina lies a peninsula of violent contrasts. The Antarctic wind lashes against its shores and the landscape is stark, marked by the arid climate. But even so, the Valdez Peninsula is a haven for wildlife in these far reaches of South America. This is an inhospitable place which nonetheless teems with life, an isolated refuge in the Atlantic where nature displays herself in all her splendor, but also her cruelty. Here, the most fascinating beauty may be a bringer of death. And the remotest corners harbor surprises. For over 3,000 years, man has been part of this peninsula and has participated in its history. He has brought violent changes, but also the solutions that have ensured the survival of its species. Because after centuries of irrational exploitation, hunting whales, seals, and penguins, man has begun to realize that the animals of this austere paradise are the wealth and the future of these lands. And today our species has become the greatest offender of the wildlife of the Valdez Peninsula. When Maria de Medina was born, things here were very different. The world had hardly heard of the Valdez Peninsula, and its uncertain future lay in the wool of the sheep grazing inland. But for Maria, it is not the interior, but rather the sight of these coasts that brings the most unforgettable childhood memories. It is here that the true Valdez reveals itself, and it is precisely the coasts that have most changed in the past 50 years. Back then, along these coasts, the great sea mammals were hunted, though this destructive industry brought virtually no income for the inhabitants of Valdez. So many sea lions, whales, and penguins were killed that when Maria was a young girl, she believed these animals would disappear forever. After all, death has always been a daily occurrence for the inhabitants of Valdez. But luckily, that young girl was wrong. The lands of the Valdez Peninsula have witnessed great natural changes. The extinction of species is nothing new to these coasts, and fossils from remote times speak of the climatic cataclysms that laid waste to entire seas. It's as if the very genesis of Valdez wanted to warn us that this land gives no second chances. However numerous animal populations may be, at these latitudes they are subjected to the rigors of a brutal climate, and the influence of external agents can trigger irreversible decline. For the animals of the interior, man was no problem. On the sparse steppes and pampas of the peninsula, the flocks of sheep did not damage the ecosystem. Maras, rares, and guanacos were happy to share the land and pasture with them. But in the rich waters that bathe these coasts, things were radically different. In the waters around the Valdez Peninsula, two currents come together. One from the north, from Brazil, and the other a cold current from the Falkland Islands. The result is a sea rich in food, and it is here that the large sea mammals come to breed. The stark landscapes of inland Patagonia were not coveted by man. But in the early days of burgeoning industry, the whales represented enormous reserves of oil, fat and meat, simply waiting to be claimed by those who ventured this far south. And whale hunting led this ocean almost to death. For almost 2 centuries, whale populations in the waters off the southern cone of America were brutally plundered. All the species were hunted. With their great ships equipped with explosive harpoons, the civilized countries filled the seas with death. Blue whales, bowhead whales, finback whales and humpback whales, sperm whales and southern right whales were all targets of this savage industry which brought all the species of the southern hemisphere to the verge of extinction. Fortunately, whale hunting is now just a black page in the history of the Valdez Peninsula, and its coasts have become a sanctuary for these cetaceans.
Whales were once hunted here in Peninsula Valdez. There was an industry, actually from the United States, came down here and they killed whales in these bays. There were at the time more whales than there are now, but probably not all that many more. Elsewhere in the world, that species was very common, the vagina franca, the white whale. But it then was brought almost to extinction. Only about 5% of the animals remained. Now it's recovering, and it's recovering very well. It's recovering at a rate of about 7% per year, which is basically explosive growth. So it's very exciting. It means that this particular area has a real possibility of coming back and being, once again, what it used to be.
In 1984, the Argentinian government declared the southern right whale a national monument. It was the first species to receive this classification, and that gave the whales total protection within Argentinian waters. And this proclamation had immediate repercussions. Today, the Valdez Peninsula is one of the most important places for the sighting and the study of whales. Every year, from July on, the whales of the southern hemisphere punctually swim into the waters of Valdez. Generally, they do not eat because they come here to breed, but these waters are so rich in nutrients, krill and fish, that some species can frequently be seen filtering the water through their sieve-like mouthplates, called balleens, which retain small fish and innumerable tiny planktonic invertebrates. The mixture of currents creates this miracle. The water here is unusually rich in plankton and algae, and these attract the more complex animals, from crustaceans and fish to the gentle whales. The ocean floor is a reflection of the lands of inland Patagonia, vast, flat, and apparently barren. But that first impression is misleading because these depths contain immeasurable biological riches, the food which will maintain entire colonies of marine mammals. The southern right whales close to the coast are often accompanied by cheerful companions. sea lions also take advantage of the abundant fishing in these waters. And it is here on these isolated coasts that they bring their young into the world. For these playful underwater acrobats, food and safety are the determining factors when it comes to choosing breeding grounds. And here on the Valdez Peninsula, they find both all around them. In the middle of December, the males start to arrive at the breeding colonies. There, they choose their territories and wait for the females, who arrive little by little to give birth to the young conceived the previous year. In just a few days, the births take place, and about 6 days later, the mothers are ready to breed again. The males, larger and with wider, darker heads, stand guard over their harems, hoping to father as many young as possible. But that is no easy task with the promiscuous females of the species. Each one will copulate from 1 to 3 times, and not always with the same male. But the sea lions are not alone. They share the beaches of the peninsula with a close relative, the voluminous elephant seals. Although they inhabit the same coasts, the sea lions and elephant seals do not compete because the former breed during the summer, whereas the elephant seals do so in the spring. In this way, they avoid competition between the two species during the breeding season and the clashes to win the females. And that's probably just as well for the sea lions, given the size of their relatives, the elephant seals. A hopeful newcomer has challenged an old male in an attempt to gain control of his harem. Now a fight is inevitable. When two giants clash, the entire colony pays attention. The elephant seals are extremely polygamous, and harems of up to 100 females have been seen under the careful watch of a single male. For this reason, from the time they arrive at the coast of Valdez at the end of July, the dominant males have to work constantly, keeping off the young pretenders in a spectacular ritual which makes the hierarchy patently clear. Life in these groups is marked by the brutal authority of the dominant male, and the rest of the group bear the scars of their encounters with him. Being the leader comes at a considerable cost for these powerful males. During the time they remain on the coast, mating and keeping rivals at bay, the dominant males do not eat. This exercise and enforced diet lasts for between 6 and 8 weeks, and in that time these monsters of up to 2,500 kilos lose between 30 and 40% of their body weight. The females appear from the middle to the end of August. A few days after they arrive, each one gives birth to a pup conceived on these beaches the previous year. And following the birth, the females too have to endure a period of fasting. During the 3 weeks they breastfeed their young, they will not eat, and all their reserves will be used up to produce the milk, extremely high in fat for the newborn pups. When the young are finally weaned, the females return to the sea to feed. But before that, to complete the cycle that began with the births, they again mate with the violent, dominant males. Then the harems break up, and males and females will not come together again until the following year. During the same months that the elephant seals come to these beaches, the Valdez Peninsula also receives the visit of other intrepid travelers. The Magellanic penguin spend half the year in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean without ever needing to approach land. Their bodies have adapted to life in the water to such an extent that in many ways they are like the fish on which they feed. Their wings have become fins which propel them, and their feathers, short and very numerous, are compacted like scales, conserving the precious body heat. But even for the penguins, there are times when their physiology forces them to return to land. And for these tireless navigators, that time is when they lay their eggs. Here on the Valdez Peninsula, the months of August and September bring a curious pilgrimage of these birds so well adapted to the sea that on land they are comically clumsy. And here at the penguin colonies in the north of the peninsula, the nesting burrows of previous years are rapidly claimed by the males who, like the elephant seals, are the first to arrive. The males normally occupy the same nest as the previous year unless some opportunist gets there first. Each male conscientiously searches out the best possible nest, which will be the one that is most sheltered and provides the greatest protection from the implacable rays of the sun. In these colonies, there are more males than females, and the females choose their mates according to the quality of his nest, so all the suitors search and fight for somewhere decent. When the couples have been formed, courtship rituals begin, essentially showing off and offering caresses, and if the female shows interest, the male immediately copulates with her. Often couples remain together for several seasons, especially if the male is able to grab the same nest as the year before. There, in tunnels dug to a depth of up to 1 meter or in cavities beneath the shrubs of the pampa, the females lay their eggs, an occasion which certain voracious observers are waiting for impatiently. The females lay 2 eggs, one shortly after mating and another one 3 or 4 days later. Of the 2, probably only one of the chicks will survive. In Valdez, as along the entire Patagonian coast, life maintains a delicate balance. Resources are never overabundant, and any source of food will immediately attract the interest of all the predators. And in this land of austerity, an egg is a real treasure. The penguin couples take it in turns to guard the nest. During this time, the colony attracts seagulls, skuas, and giant petrels, for whom the newborn chicks are an easy and extremely nutritious prey. For these robber skuas, as for the seagulls and petrels prowling around the penguin nest, the eggs are quite simply a necessity. This is also the time when they breed and give birth to the chicks, and so they need extra supplies of food to nourish their young. When the penguins arrive on the coast to breed and lay their eggs, they come with fat reserves which allow them to survive this time of fasting. And that was something that did not go unnoticed for the first navigators and explorers of this region of Patagonia. The ruins of an old factory are a reminder of dark days for the fauna of the Valdez Peninsula. Here they extracted penguin oil, which was sold as a high-performance fuel. And like them, the elephant seals and sea lions also suffered indiscriminate hunting, which moreover took place precisely during the mating season. The colonies of Valdez were decimated for their oil, meat and skins until in the mid-20th century tourism took over and the hunts became history. Today these sinister structures remain as a monument to human greed. And in the rusted cavities the Magellanic penguins build their nest as a kind of subtle revenge for the extermination of their ancestors. The sea lions give birth to their young several months later when the southern summer warms up the coasts of Patagonia. Here at Punta Norte at the end of the peninsula, almost 400 are born each year and the population slowly rises year after year. For the first year, the sea lion pups remain on the coast, looked after by the mothers. These go out to fish every day to replace energy and so to be able to produce the milk with which they feed their young. And that means they need someone to look after the young while they are away. All the mothers have the same problem, and so the sea lions have created their very own nursery schools. The mothers and the aunts take it in turns to look after the young while the others go out to fish. Those left behind stand guard and give swimming lessons where groups of pups learn about the resources within their reach and to fear the dangers lurking in the sea. In this way, they discover that in the waters of Valdez, it's not all play and finding food is hard work. From the 16th century, men hunted the sea lions along these coasts until in 1953, this slaughter was officially banned. On the Valdez Peninsula, they are now strictly protected. Men no longer hunt them, and little by little they are losing their fear. On land, they have no enemies and know they are safe. But in the water, where sooner or later they will have to go in search of food, the sea lions face their natural predators. And those predators are hunters to be feared. Nine meters long and weighing 8 tons, the orcas are merciless predators of the seas. But despite their size, it is their intelligence and their family structure that have made these cetaceans the most efficient hunters in the ocean. Orcas live off the coast of the Valdez Peninsula all year round, but it is when the sea lions give birth to their pups that they are most often seen. The family groups swim along the shore looking for some unwary prey, or a young pup who is not yet aware of the danger lurking in the water. Armed with one of the most highly developed intelligences of the animal kingdom, the orcas adapt to the particular characteristics of the area in which they live. Here in Valdez, there are many young sea lions waiting on the rocks along the shore, and the smooth pebbly bottom is perfect for sliding along. So the orcas have developed here a method which consists of hunting the sea lion pups by intentionally running aground on the beaches. Alberto Budas has been studying this behavior for the past 9 years, using the method of photo identification to recognize and monitor the members of the different families.
In the past 8.5 years, we have photo-identified 26 individuals, of which 13 have disappeared and 4 are calves. It is still vitally important to know the true condition of the population of orcas, which have developed a peculiar technique of intentionally running aground in order to capture sea lion or elephant seal pups on the rocks.
The orcas are the largest predators in the sea, but the Valdez Peninsula is full of paradoxes, and here the most aggressive animals come not from the ocean, but from the air. The entire land surface and the sea around the peninsula are the hunting grounds of these voracious marine birds. Hunters and carnivores, the seagulls make sure absolutely nothing goes to waste. They eat the corpses of other animals, steal the penguins' eggs, and even dare to take on the largest animals in the world.
We have a huge problem here with, of all things, seagulls. I mean, when I started researching here, if somebody had told me that the biggest problem we would face was what seagulls do to whales, I would have thought they were crazy. But what happens is gulls fly down, they attack the whales, and they bite holes in their back. They are literally eating the whales alive. And this goes on in such a way that the whales are simply frantic to escape them. They do everything in their power to avoid them. And now whales are lying at the surface with their head and their tail in the air because the seagulls don't attack so much on the head and on the tail. But the back is where they are digging holes in the back. They create holes which are this big in the back of the whales, and it must be incredibly painful. The reactions of the whales are absolutely violent. So this, I think, may chase the whales out of this area, and if it does, it will be a great tragedy for this area.
A southern right whale has run aground with the low tide. While the wardens and naturalists of Valdez take care of it, the seagulls will keep their distance. They know the rising tide will force the men away, and up in the air they patiently wait. With no one to bother them and with the giants still immobile, the seagulls gather on the back of their victim. The appearance of waste dumps in nearby areas had led to an alarming increase in the number of seagulls, and little by little they are becoming a dangerous threat for the large whales. Incapable of defending itself, the whale is subjected to the constant pecking of these voracious butchers. Only its incredible size will save its life. But by the time the water has risen sufficiently for it to swim free, its back will be raw flesh. During the month of June, when penguins and elephant seals start to arrive along these coasts, the pregnant right whale females approach the Valdez Peninsula to give birth and raise their young in these calm waters. In Argentinian waters, the whales have absolute protection, and this means we can enjoy rare sights such as this albino whale calf clearly standing out against the dark southern waters. The lack of pigmentation is not necessarily a defect which will endanger the life of the young whale, but outside the protected waters, it will be easier for the Japanese or Norwegian whalers to spot, and that means that white whales are extremely scarce. At At the same time as the pregnant females come here to give birth, the males approach in search of a mate. The females only come here once every 3 years because their gestation period lasts 12 months and breastfeeding for another year. But for the males, this is an obligatory annual gathering, the chance to perpetuate their genes. Copulation is very brief. The whales have to join their enormous bodies while floating in the water, and mating often takes place at the surface. Stomach against stomach, the union of two whales is an extraordinary sight at the surface, a confusion of bodies and fins. One minute after the male has become erect, the coupling is over, and the pair separate until, perhaps in 3 years' time, destiny will again bring them together in these waters. The dusky dolphins, or Fitzroy dolphins, take advantage of the calm of the waters around the Valdez Peninsula to pair up and mate. Whales and dolphins do not disturb each other during their lovemaking. For the dolphins, the enormous whales are a cause for curiosity and a source of entertainment. And for the giants of the sea, these small creatures remain entirely unnoticed. But being small also has its advantages. Their size makes erotic underwater games much easier, and unlike the heavy whales, their frequent couplings involve agile maneuvers beneath the water, swimming all the while. The arrival of the southern summer marks a profound change in the life of the Valdez Peninsula. For several months, the lands of Patagonia will receive both the warmth and the cold winds from the south. The weather becomes more temperate, and for the land animals, it is a time of abundance when, for a while, the climate declares a truce. An armadillo has entered the territory of two gray foxes. During the balmy days at the end of spring and the start of summer, insects, fruits, and small invertebrates abound out on the pampa, and this small armor-plated creature scurries around the low scrub, gathering anything edible. The foxes are familiar with the armadillo and know it is best not to disturb him because he is a rather short-tempered creature. So they keep their distance and wait for the intruder to abandon their territory of his own accord. Ignoring both foxes and armadillos, the guanacos appear nervous among the same thickets. For these American camels, this is the mating season, and the males frequently wage battle to gain the favor of the females. The heat seems to awaken life in the interior, and in the bush and the open prairies, activity lain dormant by the cold stirs once more. The maras, or Patagonian hares, guard over their burrows out in the open field. These Patagonian rodents need to be constantly on the lookout because they live on the open pastures. Not even when they are breastfeeding their young do they drop their guard. Their nipples are positioned laterally, so while her young are suckling, the mother can remain upright, scanning the vast horizon around her burrow. The heat affects not only the wild animals. For the sheep farmers who own these lands, this is a time of hard work. From the early days of colonization, sheep have formed part of the landscape of the Valdez Peninsula. The large farms have preserved the stark, fragile nature of this remote landscape, and the sheep have been integrated into the ecosystem without damaging it. But though they are domesticated, the change of season also affects them, as it means it is time for shearing. For centuries, wool was the backbone of the economy of the Valdez Peninsula, virtually the only source of income. But things are now changing. Wool has fallen in value and competition has become much more fierce. And now the lands which sheep farming helped conserve are returning the favor, as its wildlife increasingly attracts tourism from all around the world, bringing a new source of income. In these southern summer days, a familiar visitor returns to the coasts of the peninsula. The Magellanic penguins take advantage of the warm weather to shed their feathers. Without them, the cold waters of the South Atlantic would kill them, so during this time they remain on land. In February, the young from the previous year and the experienced adults return to fill the penguin colonies where they will mate and lay their eggs. During the molting season, they cannot go into the water, and that means a prolonged fast until the new feathers have completely covered their bodies. Until then, they have just two options: fast or die. For the unexperienced young, it is a very harsh test. Entering water as cold as this without the insulation of their plumage, or being weak or ill, can mean a rapid death for the penguins. And every year, the beaches of Valdez bear witness to the fate of those who are unable to endure the rigors of a starvation diet. The penguin's tragedy is, however, a stroke of luck for the armadillo. Its constant wanderings in search of food have led him to the dead body, and as we have seen in these lands of scant resources, no source of protein ever goes to waste. Its claws, normally used for digging, now serve to get at the meat, and for a few hours the nervous armadillo becomes an efficient scavenger who will clean the corpse of all useful matter. Another circle closes, and death once more gives energy so life can continue. The sea lions have by now arrived to mate and bring their pups into the world. And wherever they go, their indefatigable predators are sure to be close behind. The beaches are bustling with activity because the sea lions have been joined by the enormous elephant seals, who, at this time of year, shed their skin and so need the warmth of the shore. It is a time of abundance for the killer whales and a reign of terror for the sea lions and elephant seals. Very few of those who suffer an attack ever live to tell the tale. The entire colony of sea lions is on the alert. But this elephant seal seems much more self-assured. His 2,000 kilos of weight make him a formidable creature. But no animal is safe when a family of orcas is out hunting. The sea lions run for cover when the deadly black fins appear offshore. But the overconfident elephant seal is too far out to return to safety, and the most terrible and beautiful death in the sea comes to claim another victim. An adult female opens a wound on the elephant seal's side and lets the young go to work. Today, death will take its time as the young hunters learn how to kill in a group. The elephant seal is weakened by the loss of blood, and the young whales find things increasingly easy. The struggle takes place just a few meters from the beach, beneath the tense gaze of the sea lions. In a desperate attempt to escape, the seal uses its last remaining energy to make for the safety of the shore. But the whales have tasted blood, and their coordinated attacks will prevent him from getting very far. Again and again, the desperate prey tries to reach the coast, but each time he finds it more difficult to advance, and his pursuers gain confidence and become increasingly impatient to satisfy their hunger. The elephant seal's only weapons are his survival instinct and fear. But then one of the adult females closes in and forces the victim out into the open sea. There, an adult male is waiting impatient and hungry, and the exhausted 2,000 kilos of seal are no match for this hunter weighing 8 tons. Then calm once more returns to the sea, and the blue waters are tinged with red. The most powerful killers in the sea have concluded their hunting lesson. In the ocean, no animal is safe from them, but orcas have never intentionally attacked a human being.
Everything related to how dangerous orcas are to be seen in light of the circumstances, how they live in the wild. A case is known in California where a young man, Hans Grinber, 18 years old, was swimming 30 meters off the coast on his surfboard looking for a wave. Then an orca grabbed hold of his left thigh, confusing it with the shape of the surfboard. Seen from below, looking up, a surfboard with a person on it looks like a seal. The orca bites Hans' left thigh. It immediately releases it and swims off at great speed, which indicates it was a mistake, some confusion. So Hans had to have 100 stitches on his left thigh because of the injury he had suffered, but it's not considered a direct attack, rather a confusion. However, we have been underwater diving alongside orcas, in my case, to see whether, while they were attacking sea lions to eat, they could confuse a diver dressed in a black neoprene suit with a sea lion and attack us. The orca is very selective in what it eats. A group of 5 orcas was just 50 centimeters from us. Then later, we were with 7 orcas for 5 or 6 hours in the water, and they never touched us. But it's revealing that in the aquariums of the world, there are attacks on instructors. There have been over 24 registered cases of deaths, several disabled instructors, and others with very serious injuries, where the orcas, stressed by claustrophobia, by being in captivity, locked in, so they turn into aggressive animals, extremely dangerous for the instructors, and this demonstrates what captivity does to any animal, or any human being for that matter.
After the hunting lesson and the copious meal, the group swims off to sea. The young still have a lot to learn until they master the technique of intentionally running aground to grab the young sea lions off the beaches. But the orcas can take all the time they need. Now in these waters, they have absolute protection, just like their natural prey. Because since the fauna here has been protected and the world has learned of the fascinating wildlife of these remote lands, new winds have blown across the Valdez Peninsula. Progressively, numbers of all these species have risen. The absolute protection has made possible the miracle of restoring to their original state coasts which for centuries were devastated by man. And in return, this flourishing of life in Valdez has brought its people new income and a promising future in the form of more and more tourists. Today, people from all over the world come to the Valdez Peninsula to enjoy the beauty of these gentle monsters of the sea, and man and whales receive mutual benefit from this relationship.
There's been tourism here for whale populations for about 25 years, and the exciting thing is that every effort we have made to show whether or not there was some negative effect of this tourism has been a failure. We cannot see any negative effect of it, and in fact we see lots of positive effects on the whales because they suddenly are appreciated by people. People fall in love with them, people care about them, and the result of that is, I think that is where the future of whales lie.
Maria de Medina has been a witness to the changes that have turned the Valdez Peninsula into a destination for nature lovers from all over the world. When she was small, sea lions, penguins and whales were still hunted here, but the profits from those industries left on the same ships that decimated these coasts. Today, Maria is satisfied with the changes. The natural wealth of her childhood has been recovered and has brought with it a new industry which leaves all its profits in this privileged land. At Puerto Piramides and Puerto Madryn, the two towns close to the peninsula, the whales are a flourishing business which has spread throughout the region. More and more people feel the need to regain contact with nature in its original state, the great open spaces and the wild animals of the earth. And the Valdez Peninsula is today one of the best places to do it. The Valdez Peninsula has become an example of bringing hope for the wildlife of the world. Maras and whales, sea lions, orcas and penguins, elephant seals and even species introduced from outside have come to a common understanding with our own species after centuries of turbulent history. This is a land of extreme harshness, but it is also a haven where life manifests itself in all its astonishing power, force and fascination. There was a time when this was simply a desolate place battered by the winds and inhabited by terrible creatures valued only for their commercial exploitation. But today, man has changed and looks on these lands in a different way. In a densely populated world where the lack of calm and wide open spaces is stifling our spirit, the Valdez Peninsula and its formidable monsters have become a beacon of hope for future generations.